Okay, so now that I've eaten my tacos, I'm outside having my evening beer since the kids are gone and I get to just chill and have my beer. So let's talk about the next thing that you gotta know about women and pleasure and sex, right? So we talked about the clit and how the clit is actually big, and you have, the shaft of the clit, and you got the little tip that kind of goes back in there, and you got the legs of the clit that go down the pubic bone, and you got the bulbs that get nice and big and squishy, and then you have the extra little spongy pad in the perineum right between the vagina and the anus. It kind of makes everything a little extra padded for the smashing. Okay, good to know. You got to know all of that. On top of that, you have the periurethral sponge, which is the same thing as the G-spot, except the G-spot is a total misnomer because it's not a spot, and it's named after a dude whose name started with a G, and the dude didn't have the part, so why on earth is part of my body named after said dude who doesn't have it? And it's really one of my favorite things, so we're just not going to call it a G-spot. But, so we're talking G-spot. So, up. Need both hands for this part. So, vagina, you got all your nice little labia in here and stuff. And so in the vagina, you have, your clit up in here, and then you have your urethra, and then you have your vagina. Here's your vulva, here's all the parts. So your urethra is laying kind of right on top of the vagina. They kind of go along together for a little ways. They're very close together. And so when all the smashing starts to happen, it could get irritated, which is why we have more erectile tissue. Yay! More erectile tissue to get nice and soft and spongy and squishy and puffy. And so there is a whole tube of erectile tissue around the urethra that runs along the top of the vagina. And if you kind of put your fingers in there and you feel it, kind of has this like dip shape, it's kind of this tube that goes back in there, but the ceiling kind of has a dip to it. That ceiling, if everybody's feeling happy, is where all that erectile tissue around the urethra has gone puff, and it gets extra sensitive and it gets extra happy. And so when you go in there and you hook your fingers up and hit the ceiling, that's when it starts to feel really good. And some people have like a little bit of that feels really good, and some people have like a lot of length that feels really good. Personally, maybe I shouldn't share this, but personally, for me, I like to go back to kind of the back edge of it, where I'm kind of right in between the two different nerve systems of the external nerves and the more internal pelvic nerves, and that's where the really special, awesome, exciting stuff happens. This is also where all the female squirting comes from, all that ejaculation that women can do. And sometimes it's a little bit of a milky substance, and sometimes it's like somebody turned on the fire hose and it goes everywhere, and that's when all the lesbians get really big grins, because that's when you hit something right. But yeah, so when that tube gets puffy, there are all these little glands in there. I think they're called Skene's glands, and they all kind of exit into that area at the entrance of the vagina and maybe a little bit out of the urethra. And so when you're stimulating that puffy sponge along the roof of the vagina, that's where you get the really amazing, oh yes, right there, yes, moments. Well, some of those moments, because there are other spots that can do that too, but that's one of the easiest or most common to find. And then if you hit it hard enough and long enough, you may or may not get squirting. And squirting, that's what you want. You want the squirting. So that is the G-spot and the aka periurethral sponge, because it is not a spot. It is a tube, and you go in there and you poke around until it feels really good and everybody gets really happy.